the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar, and we're speaking on day one of lockdown 3.0. Now, some in government are calling this more like an extension and start of lifting of lockdown 2.0 instead of lockdown 3.0. But frankly, it doesn't matter. Call it whatever you may. Here are the ground realities. On this day, India is now asking itself whether it's in the red zone, the green zone, or the orange zone. On the face of it, the zone you find yourself in should be making your life very, very different. But is that only on paper, or is that truly happening? Well, day one has been a little challenging. There have been stumbling blocks and a lot of chaos and some confusion. There have been clarifications and then re-clarifications on various issues. So let's give you just a snapshot. There is chaos and different versions about whether migrant workers will be paying for their own train tickets home or not. Well, frankly, migrant workers should not be paying for any train ticket home, especially after they've been stranded for so long and have had no livelihood. It turned into a fight between the opposition party, the Congress, and the centre. When the Congress said it would pay up for migrant workers, the centre then clarified, saying it was supposed to be borne between central and state governments. There has been confusion about liquor shops reopening. Now remember, states are keen to reopen liquor shops because it's a major source of revenue that states have lost over the last few days. But within hours, we saw scenes of huge crowds and social distancing thrown to the winds in several places. Some shops then had to be shut down. All through the day, there was a lack of clarity, and there still is, whether this will continue or not if people don't maintain social distancing norms. We've seen a similar situation in standalone non-essential shops, a very specific category which has been allowed to open everywhere except containment zones. But very few actually have because of a lack of clarity in local guidelines and permissions or that kind of authority. The confusion over e-commerce still prevails. E-commerce is allowed in green and orange zones for non-essentials, but not in red zones. The question is why, if it could be safer. And for industry, there is definitely a wait and watch mode as they try and figure out whether they can get the labor back, as they try and figure out the new rules and regulations, and also try and figure out if the demand still exists. So today on the show, we are going to get you ground reports from various parts of the country covering various facets. We also have a brilliant list of speakers. Don't miss today's show at all. We're going to start off by hearing Gautam Singhania, CMD of the Raymond Group. We'll also be listening to Vice Chairman and CEO of HDFC, Keki Mistry. I am going to be speaking with Dr. Hank Beckerdam. He's the World Health Organization representative to India and will give us an idea of where we stand in this fight against COVID-19. We also are going to hear from ACE investor Ramdev Agarwal. All of this lined up in the next hour or so, so stay tuned. But first, let's begin by getting you all these voices from the ground today.
As lockdown 3.0 begins, albeit with some relaxations, here's a report on if our economies too have truly opened up. Considering the top 8 states of the country, more than half of their districts fall under green or orange zones. Maharashtra is one of the most affected states, which has 22 districts under green or orange zones out of a total of 36 districts. In Karnataka, only 3 districts come under the red zone, while Kerala, which is being lauded nationwide for its containment strategy, has only 2 districts classified as red zone. But this does not spell relief for states economically. Data suggests that a majority of the contribution of state GDP comes from areas that are locked under the red zone. 42% of India is in green zone, but according to CFAC, more than 50% of India's GDP comes from the red zone. So for example, over 70% of Maharashtra's GDP comes from its red zone, which includes districts like the financial capital Mumbai, Pune, Nagpur, Sholapur, etc. While Karnataka sees over 40% of its GDP contribution from red zone districts, with its IT hub Bengaluru too being locked under. Meanwhile, for industry, the guidelines that allow migrant workers to return home just as manufacturing restarts has compounded the problem of shortage of workers. With the front end, that is stores selling non-essentials, still not fully open, especially in high-demand metropolitan areas, the return to full capacity is going to be sometime in the coming.
Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal yesterday said that the time has come to reopen Delhi. I am in one of the busiest markets here in Delhi, which is Lajpat Nagar. On usual days, you cannot even walk in this market. But despite the government giving some sort of relaxations with respect to the lockdown, it seems that it is going to be some time before activity picks up in Delhi. If you can look around me, mostly there are shops that sell clothes, jewelry, a lot of cosmetics, shoes, but so far these markets are shut, mostly due to the fact that all the districts in Delhi fall under the red zone. There is still no activity and still some time before things get back to normal. Having said that, in Delhi, in the morning we did see long queues outside some liquor stores. Besides that, the government has already allowed 33% of the workforce to return to their offices. Call centers are open, IT hubs have been opened, they have been asked to sanitize as well. But given the fact that there is no public transport just yet, this is also one of the reasons that we will see very little activities in the days to come.
You can see the kind of lines there are in the shops. You can see this is one of the very few liquor shops which is opened in Mumbai. Social distancing is being maintained at this point of time. You can see people are standing in line, and there is enough police as well to take care of the fact that social distancing is being maintained. In fact, we spoke to Anil Deshmukh that by afternoon there was some confusion about it, but at least at this point of time, there are long lines you can see, and this goes till the next at least 50 meters of what I can see. This is the town area. So even since the morning, Anil Deshmukh also told us that this will be a big challenge for the authorities to make sure that social distancing is being maintained in these areas. But then excise and the kind of revenue it gets is also something which is very important for the state governments, especially in these times. And that is why this decision has been taken by the government. But again, the bigger challenges are that the social distancing is maintained in these areas. At least in this point of time, you can see people standing in lines. There are areas earmarked for them where they need to stand. But clearly, this will be a big trouble for the authorities going ahead to make sure that social distancing remains in these areas.
For industry, it's been a catch-22 right from the get-go. They have been allowed to open, but the conditions they have found are stringent. They have to keep workers either on site or be completely irresponsible if any of them contract COVID-19. The supply chain is still a little bit patchy and challenging. And on the other hand, they don't know where the demand will come from. So today we're going to start off by speaking with Mr. Gautam Singhania on how his group is managing the situation. Speaking to me now on the first day of lockdown 3.0, and Mr. Gautam Singhania. Mr. Singhania, welcome. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
And that too on a day when we're trying to figure out now what the next 2 weeks looks like. So let me begin just by getting your take. The country is now essentially, for practical purposes, divided into red, orange, and green zones. You and I are both speaking from red zones. But in terms of your businesses, in terms of manufacturing, has there been any relief finding some outlets and some production capabilities in orange and green zones?
So yeah, I think firstly, let me just flag, I think lockdown 3.0 is slightly different from the lockdown 1 or 2 because there is a partial relief. So we always knew that the opening is not going to be on day, on one particular day. It will partially open, they'll test the waters and move forward. So I think that is a big step forward. I also believe that unless the stores don't open and the sales don't start, the manufacturing will take a lag to start. So we are seeing some stores open. I think Raymond would have opened about 8 to 10% of its stores today. We have to see what kind of traction we get in it, whether the consumer will come back or not. But I'm pretty hopeful that the consumer will. And there will be a lag to manufacturing.
What about production capabilities? The last time we spoke, Mr. Singhania, you talked about the issues of labor and of very stringent norms and responsibilities that the companies have towards social distancing, etc. Now, there have been some clarifications over time from various authorities on culpability of the top boss if someone gets, contracts COVID-19. But the social distancing and stringency of the norms are here to stay for the foreseeable future. Do you think this is workable? Are you in the process of putting all of these conditions in place?
See, we'll have to do our best in this situation. But as far you can control probably people within your work environment, how do you control them when they leave the factories and go back to their homes? That's really out of your control. And creating camps for such large number of workers to live within your facilities and sanitation facilities for that, I think that is impractical.
Okay. I just want to get your take on what we've been seeing so far as well. Partial relief, as you've said, and on day one at least, there has been a lot of confusion. There's confusion in regards to what e-commerce can or cannot do. There's confusion state-wise, and these are broad issues that I'm talking about, on liquor shops being open, not being open. There's confusion about how migrant workers will get home and who's paying for their tickets. Do they have to pay for themselves? There's a little bit of lack of clarity on standalone shops in several areas. Do you think this is a concern, that as we're trying to progress to the next level, there is such a lack of clarity on so many fronts?
You see, listen, when you're doing something which is in uncharted territory, there is going to be confusion. And I'd actually say it's better to have good confusion than nothing at all. I don't think anybody is going to be able to think through every single thing that needs to be done on day one. Sometimes you're 80% ready, you're going to take the plunge, and there will be questions. So sometimes you might take a decision on 80% of what you believe is right, and then, there's confusion. Let's address the confusion.
Okay. I also want to get your take on the India Revival Mission, Mr. Singhania. The India Revival Mission is an effort, a campaign across the Times network, where we talk about how India can not only survive, but also thrive beyond COVID-19 as well. What do you think we need to do in terms of the steps to put that in place? Now, as we speak, we're still waiting for an economic package. We don't know when it will come and what shape it will take. But meanwhile, do you think the priority needs to be to start economic activity in whatever form and fashion it can?
So, like I said, you have to start opening up the sales, which is the first part of the economic revival. I strongly and I'm very passionate about this whole concept of be Indian and buy Indian. I think India has got 1.3 billion people. And whilst the world looks at India as a market, I think we should look inwardly and see what is the power of this huge market that we have. And if each of us say that we're going to be Indian and buy Indian for 1 year and, focus on that, I think we can revive our economy much faster than anybody else in the world probably can. You have 1.3 billion people. So, for example, I was talking to a friend and I said, the person said that, I'm fed up of sitting in the house. I'm dying to go to Goa. And I said, please go to Goa, because that way you will consume fuel, you'll consume tires on a car, you'll go to a hotel, you'll give it business, you'll go to a restaurant, a tourist taxi, whatever. And I think that economic revival can be very, very powerful. Number two, I think what China has done to the world, I've been very vocal about it. I think, we really need to go against Chinese products, because they've got to understand what they've done to the world is not right. I mean, we should not permit Chinese products into this country. That will also help our own economic revival. I think as the world is changing, people are going back into their own economies. A lot of the barriers that were broken are now back up for a bit. So I think we got to be Indian, buy Indian, think Indian, and really work on our own survival strategy and come out of this mess.
Mr. Singhania, I really appreciate the sentiment, and a lot of people are echoing it. But the reality is, and the reason why there has been so much of a dependence on China up till now, not just from India, from across the world, is because of production capability at scale that they have managed. They have been the suppliers of, the best possible quality at that price throughout the world, and Indian companies have not been able to compete. How can we compete?
Well, I mean, it's really building world-class facilities and scale. I mean, Chinese might be the best price, but that doesn't mean it's the best quality. Like you said, it's the best quality at that price. But if you take a 10-year period and you add COVID-19 into it, tell me, does the long-term maths work out? It probably wouldn't, because the kind of supply chain disruption it has caused globally, if you actually add that factor in, it probably be much more expensive. How many businesses around the world have come to a halt because of the China disruption and the cost, therefore? So we don't look at that. We don't look at those risks. And I think India is really sitting in a great place where we can take advantage of this. I think it's how quickly we do it.
Let's talk about how we can do this in terms of taking advantage in, say, the textile sector or the export sector, both spaces where we've been beaten back pretty badly over the last few years on a global scale. You had nations like Bangladesh, Vietnam, zoom ahead. Do you think that this is a time to also reset and refocus on what can actually make us more competitive?
Sure, I think the new world order is going to be very different. And if we reset and focus, I'm sure we can come out ahead. There are many issues, and that can be a completely full discussion on what India could do to attract investment. And there are many more competent people that need to do that. But there are a lot of things that need to be done to make us competitive, whether it's our own labor laws or infrastructure, etc. But I'm sure we can get there, given the right.
Okay, let me bring it back a bit to the current situation, and not a very forward-looking sort of a take. In the current situation, you have, as of today, in lockdown 3.0, businesses that are allowed to start production. Some standalone stores can you're opening up parts of the economy, and you also have a large number of people who will migrate back home who found themselves stranded. Do you see this as, in a sense, pulling in two different directions and making the labor shortage even more severe?
Frankly, I think whilst the labor has gone back home, they've gone back home because they didn't have a source of income. But if you actually see the reason why the labor comes to the cities or to the manufacturing or to places like this is to earn money. And that fundamental need to earn money will not be met in the villages. So whichever way you look at it, it may be a little bit of a lag, but I certainly believe that the labor will come back.
You were talking a little while earlier, Mr. Singhania, about your conversation with a friend who wanted to drive down to Goa. Do you think something like that, return to normal, is feasible even by the end of 2020? Or are we looking at a new normal setting in a lot of ways?
See, there might be new normals. There might be, the only thing in life that's constant is change. We just have to embrace the change. And, if it's a new normal, it's a new normal, but at least it's a normal. I mean, what we do today was not what we did 20 years ago. So maybe the pace at which it will change, but, the fact is you're still going to say, okay, I'm going to embrace this and I'm still going to live my life. I mean, I've been seeing videos today look at the amount of lines outside liquor shops. People are still going to go and drink.
Yeah, and maybe that's counterproductive to social distancing as well. And part of the challenges of opening up one step at a time.
No, I think, new normal, people are not going to stop drinking. They're just having Zoom drinks with people. So they're sitting at home and having drinks over Zoom. But so that may be in the short, but I think the bounce back will come. I don't think we should be so scared. Because fundamentally, like I was saying, I said nothing substitutes a face-to-face meeting. A Zoom call is a 1D meeting. A face-to-face is a 3D meeting. And you cannot do the same thing on a Zoom call.
Yeah. Well, it's great to at least have this interview with you via technology. So thank you so much, Mr. Singhania, for speaking.
Thank you. Thank you very much.